This is Jak and Daxter, Crash Bandicoot, Sora, Sly Cooper, and Ratchet and Clank. This is a dude that grew up on PlayStation 4. Or PlayStation 2, not 4. PlayStation 2. And how do I know that? Because I had all the same games. They were so good.
Do you ever think back to when video games were just simple? When games could just be games, and you could be an idiot 6-year-old who can't figure out how to get off the starting island in Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, you actually you got to hit the tree to get the coconuts. The coconuts will fall down.
Hit it. Yeah. It feels like back then they could just make anything they wanted to. Studios took chances, building experiences that, while not perfect, were still iconic. And don't get it twisted, all right? I like the AAA games we're getting right now. I'm definitely not saying that video games aren't fun anymore. But I can't help looking back at all these older games and missing the charm that they all had, especially compared to now. They definitely weren't.
I think that you still have that a lot with games, right? It's just that you also have these games that are made as corporate slop as well. Yeah, I think that trophies, like, I actually think that having achievements in video games was bad for video games. Maybe this is a hot take, but I think that it ends up being worse for video games than being good. Because, like, what they do is they direct gameplay, and oftentimes it does it in a way that's annoying or unfun.
All fantastic, but when I look back at them, they all just
By the way, I don't think that's like an objective opinion. Like, I don't think people that disagree are wrong or something like that. That's just the way I see it.
So whimsical and wonderfully simple to me. And sure, you know, that opinion is probably largely shaped around nostalgia. And it's more likely I miss the simpler times in my life. Which, we'll talk about nostalgia more towards the end of the video, but I do mean this literally. I adore the simplicity of the games from this era. When I talk about a time when video games were simple, I think a different time period probably comes to each of our heads, right? For you, it might be the
1998.
PS1, or even the Atari if you're ancient and decaying. For me, I think of the PS2 and just all those classic games from that console. Like Kingdom Hearts, Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, the weird game with the alien face on the cover that kind of freaked me out too much to pick up. The hundreds of stupid licensed games that came out around this time that were all just exactly the same, except that one. I loved that one.
I think the Lord of the Rings one was good too. Like the second and third one were really good. The Two Towers and Return of the King was really good. It's actually a good game.
Every game didn't have to be a groundbreaking cinematic masterpiece. It could just be a fun game. One aspect I really admire about those PS2 games is that they seem to prioritize gameplay and fun over anything. Whereas anymore, it seems gameplay gets sidelined by the cutscenes and the story.
I think this is a huge problem too, and I think this is one of the big reasons why people like From Software games, is that a lot of the actual games that come out, it seems like they have great cutscenes, great sound, great, graphics and everything, but actually playing the game, like actually going down and playing the game, is hard to do. It's not good.
The gaming industry has changed a lot over the years, okay? It's not your grandpa's GameCube anymore. We got esports teams and VR chat twerk-offs now. The Last of Us is a phenomenal game series that tells a familiar yet strikingly unique story and has some of the best character writing I've ever seen in a video game. Due to some not-so-careful redactions, we learned that on their latest entry, The Last of Us Part 2, Naughty Dog spent $220 million over the course of 6 years to develop the game. To put that into perspective, they developed the first Crash Bandicoot game for $1.7 million. With that $220 million, they delivered on these stunning, cutting-edge graphics, as well as creating a gripping narrative and overall impactful experience. But when you play these games, it becomes abundantly clear that—
I just think this is like entropy, right? Where, like, once things get big, they just get bigger. It's like, oh, well, we made 100 million on this one. Well, let's spend 100 million on the next one instead of 50, and we'll make 300 million. It's like people just keep upping the ante and scaling up and up and up.
The Last of Us does not embrace its
Until it
identity
fails.
as a video game at all. The gameplay loop consists of you walking around slowly, looking at everything like you're in a museum, maybe avoiding some mushroom zombies sometimes. And if you walk into an area with waist-height walls, you know some guys are gonna come out and try to shoot at you. The combat is—
I think another good example of like gameplay being king is Once Human and First Descendant. Both of these games don't have any real focus on story. They don't have any focus on world building. The graphics are Unreal 5 slop. And it doesn't really matter because the games play well and there's a good combat loop, right? And that's why people are playing them. You look at how popular, look at Power World, right? It doesn't really matter. And these are just devs that try to, I think, one of the worst things to happen to video games is video game developers thinking that they are movie stars or thinking that they are movie directors. Find it very annoying. Obviously, Kojima is not included, but everybody else besides him.
Passable at best, and over time just becomes a boring obstacle between you and the next cutscene. It really is a shame, you know, because the world they've built is so beautiful to look at, but there's nothing to touch.
Who cares?
I'm all for story in a game, but
bro, that's so fucking true. Listen to this again.
Beautiful to look at, but there's nothing to touch.
That's exactly fucking right, bro. That's so perfectly fucking stated. Yes. It's a great world. It looks amazing, but what the fuck are you going to do in it? What's the point? Why is it there?
For story in a game, but it should never take precedent over the actual gameplay. And hey, I'm a problem solver, all right?
I actually think that story-based games like The Last of Us are great and they have a place, but I think too many games try to go this route, and I think they're making a mistake by doing so. That's really, like, I have no problem with this. It's great, but the problem is, like, there's like it seems like there's trying to be like a merging of like entertainment mediums where people are trying to be like TV shows and movies with games. And like you see this obviously with things like Suicide Squad, The Last of Us Part 2, etc. It's very annoying because games are not the same thing.
Here to help you, Naughty Dog. I'm going to tell you exactly what you have to do to fix this problem. You go through a couple of levels, you get us really hooked in, and then you give Ellie a fishtail, and you have her swim around and sing a really bad song with Ariel from The Little Mermaid.
And the song sounds like Zenless Zone Zero.
It's got to be really, really bad. Really, it's got to be horrible.
No, you're right. You can't do that, okay? It's a serious game with a serious tone. We don't need to do any of that. You know, no game has ever retained its serious tone while breaking immersion slightly for the sake of fun. It's never been done. It's not going to happen, all right? Bad example. I'm sorry. Let's look at the Insomniac Spider-Man games instead. You know, they're wacky and less based in realism. They had a phenomenal story, except for the third act of the second game. I'm still pretty mad about that. Peter should have been Venom. I'm standing on that business. And the gameplay here, oh my God, they got it perfect. They did it. They did what Naughty Dog couldn't do. Sometimes. I could web sling around the city all day, and they had their Little Mermaid moment.
That's nice that they have that. I mean, it's cool that they have that, but like, I remember, you remember Spider-Man? Was it Spider-Man 1 or 2? For the original PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2? That game, you could do that in that game. That was, sometimes I think back, like, I remember playing that game, and like, I didn't really like superhero games a lot, but I remember playing it, I'm like, man, this is really good. What the fuck? I was like, I didn't know what to think.
Venom and I guess Mary Jane now, that was all right. But what I want to talk to you about specifically are the mini games. You know, those little moments where it's like, oh, Peter's a scientist. Here's some scientist stuff. Match up these different colors and lines because he's a scientist. It's science stuff. Those have got to be the worst mini games ever made. And Insomniac knows it because why else would they give you an option to skip them? It's all right, whatever. They didn't come up that much in the first one. I can get over it. At least I got to skip them and move on. Maybe they'll take them out by the second one. Wrong. It's different this time. Now it's in 3D and you got to take out the bad shapes. It's worse. It's somehow so much worse in this one. And I know it's a relative.
It's because people think that they can always make it better. And this is, again, another big problem with developers now, is that a lot of these devs think that they can make it better. They're like, okay, well, I have my way that I'm going to do it better than somebody else. It's like, again, Game of Thrones or Rings of Power. Okay, let me get this straight. There's a guy that they have spent 20, 30, 40, 10, maybe, I don't know, $1 million paying this guy not to do anything, but just to let them use his book. He doesn't have to do anything. He just gives a book. Oh, yeah, sure. And just tell us what to do. And you think you're two idiots. You think that you know better than he does? Oh, if you know so good, then why is nobody buying your book? Why nobody making a show about your book? You think that you're going to be able to do it better than Tolkien? Which, by the way, Tolkien wasn't just like some, he wrote a book. This guy was like an esteemed college professor. He was a World War I soldier. He was a linguist. Like, he invented entire languages out of the world he made. Like, this dude defined fantasy. Like, almost all of the fantasy tropes that we have now, many of them are derivative from Lord of the Rings. Tolkien made fantasy. Yes, he defined it. But no, but you know how it's, but you know what to do. You know how to, but you know better than that. What are you thinking, man?
Really small problem to point out, but man, just situations like this just make me miss games like Sly Cooper that would put you in a submarine and say, there's crabs coming to steal the treasure. You have to shoot all the crabs and make sure they don't come get it. They didn't bother trying to make it make sense within the story. They just made something fun. I don't think every AAA game needs to be goofy, but I do. You know
what a really great example of this is recently? You know it, I know it, everybody knows it. Another Crab's Treasure. That was a PlayStation 2 game made in the year 2024. It was. And it was fucking amazing. Crab Souls? Yep.
That video games are at their best when they embrace their identity as video games and deliver experiences only they can.
I never got this
It seems
far
like
in the
they
game.
really went in this direction because these cinematic games have the most wide reach. They don't really want to risk it with something that might not appeal to everyone, right? We could never get an insane concept like Kingdom Hearts made today. The idea of taking...
I think the reason why they do it actually is because these games have the highest projected potential revenue. So from a studio perspective that's like investor driven, that's what they're going to care about the most. Because like they can project revenue based off of a target audience that this game could attract that's going to be higher than any other game. So that's really the reason why I think it happens.
These two insanely different franchises, Final Fantasy, a JRPG series, and the Disney multiverse, and mashing them together in some big world-hopping adventure led by a character nobody's ever heard of. That is just not something we would get today. And do you know how this idea came to be? Well, apparently back in the 90s, Square Enix and Disney both had offices in the same building. And one fateful day, an employee from Square Enix and an employee from Disney just so happened to end up in the same elevator. And they got to talking, and they were like, hello, Disney employee I just met. Wouldn't it be cool to mash up our universes together?
I never heard of this.
And then send some kid around them beating everything up with a key?
Yeah, I've never heard of this before.
And that, kids, is how Kingdom Hearts came to be. I read it on nextshark.com, so you know it's true. If there ever was a video game that embraced its identity as a video game, it is goddamn Kingdom Hearts. This game makes no sense, but is so much fun. Why the hell is Cloud?
Another game, like, again, another Crab's Treasure is one example, and Pal World is another example. Pal World doesn't worry about, like, a story. It's not about, like, the graphics. Yeah, the game looks good, but, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, people just want to have good gameplay. And, like, Helldivers 2. What's the story of Helldivers 2? Yeah, Super Earth, and there's, like, democracy, and there's, like, aliens that hate democracy, so you shoot them, and then there's robots, you shoot them, too. And, like, yeah, basically, you have to blow them up, and that's it. It's really simple. Monster Hunter, yeah. Gameplay games always come out ahead.
From Final Fantasy, making a deal with Hades and fighting in the hero games on Olympus. I don't know, who cares? I'm Sora and I'm gonna hit this big dog with a key I found. When you travel between the different Disney worlds in Kingdom Hearts, sometimes the art style, the character designs, and even entire gameplay mechanics will change based on where you go. I keep referencing the Little Mermaid level in Kingdom Hearts because genuinely when I played this, it was so mind-blowing to me. I love that even at a point so deep into this game, they were still willing to change the fundamental mechanics of how you play it just to keep things fresh. And don't even get me...
I think a really good example for me isn't actually... I never really played Kingdom Hearts, never really gave a shit about it. But going down to Ash Lake in Dark Souls 1. A random tree that's off on the side of somewhere else. If you have to climb all the way up a tree or all the way down a tree, and then you do that, and you come out into this massive fucking area, and it's like you hear the music, oh, and there's fucking a giant hydra there, these like weird bugs, and you go all the way through there, and there's a fucking dragon at the end of it, and you can cut off his tail and get one of the best weapons in the game. Like, what the fuck? It's crazy. And it was like, how many people discovered that? I would say probably less than 20% of people that played Dark Souls for the first time discovered that.
Started on the goddamn Gumi ship. I don't know if it's Gumi or Gummy. I've been saying Gumi.
Probably.
When I first played it, it was kind of annoying at first. I was thinking, why am I doing this? But now, anymore, I'm traveling between the worlds and I'm up in the Gumi ship. I'm just shooting stuff. Why the hell do they need a spaceship to get between the Disney worlds? I don't know why they thought they needed a spaceship, but it was awesome. And it was the Gumi ship, and shut the fuck up. I'm not entirely sure if this is the case, but it really seems to me like when games were cheaper to make, studios were willing to make pretty much anything and just throw it out.
He's right. Yeah, and it makes sense, right? I mean, if your investment is a lot lower, of course you can take more risks. That's common sense. Of course. Yeah, so now they can't afford to take risks whenever they invest $150 million into a video game. So again, they have to make the video game appeal to everyone, which makes it appeal to no one.
I was eating it up. I loved sitting down crisscross applesauce on the floor of a GameStop, just going through the wall of so many different PS2 games, picking out insane shit like Marvel Nemesis, Rise of the Imperfects. I feel like I dreamed this. Sure, they were goofy and didn't exactly maximize profit, but does that mean they weren't worth making? I guess where AAA's concerned,
I think another really great example of this recently is Armored Core 6, is that From Software has made Souls games for the last 10 years, and then they just decide, hey, by the way, you know those mech games we used to make? We're going to do another one. Okay. And it was great. It was awesome.
Always going to be
it's a different audience.
If you want a
I think a little
game
bit.
developer,
you're right about
you
that.
look to the indie games. There's got to be some video essay YouTuber to indie game pipeline because I was never really that into indie games, but recently I played Hades and Rollerdrome, and it was some of the most fun I've had playing games in a long time. While it seems the games that prioritize fun overall are only coming from indie developers anymore, there is a genre.
That's because the developers, the big studios, are trying to make games that they want to make the next The Last of Us. They want to make God of War. Because I do think that a lot of those studio, like the main people that are like behind these games, want to be considered with like the same degree of like respect that a director of movies is. I do think that there's a big ego behind it.
Of game that was
I know it sounds like stupid, but I think it's true.
And that, my friends, is the shitty licensed games. This has got to be the greatest loss in my lifetimes. Those shitty early 2000s movie tie-in licensed games that came with every mildly successful property. If there was a cartoon you liked in the early 2000s,
there's a game for it.
Tie-in game.
That's right.
If there was a movie you kind of enjoyed, tie-in game. Look up any franchise that had moderate success in this time period and add the game at the end, and you're probably gonna get something. It would be impossible.
And they were all garbage, except for like 5.
Count how many there were, and they were all bad, but I loved them anyway. Like the Cat in the Hat movie tie-in game, what a beautiful nightmare that was. Give me a bottle of Dayquil and the Cat in the Hat PS2 game, and I'm having a great week. If you've ever played one of these games before, you've probably seen this little intro screen.
THQ? Yeah.
THQ was responsible for not all, but a lot of these tie-in games. It seemed their business model was to buy up the license for a mildly successful property,
and then make a mildly good game.
Cheap, easy game, and launch it right when that movie or TV show was peaking in popularity so that they could feed off of that hype. And clearly it worked, because in the span of a couple of years, they released literal hundreds of...
Holy fuck. That's insane. How do you do this? It's a good try. Yeah, how much money did they make?
games. They hit the cartoons hard. They got Jimmy Neutron, Scooby-Doo, so
That's what I'm
much
curious
SpongeBob.
about.
Fairly Odd Parents, Tack and the Mother
farming.
Fudging Power of Juju. This one was a banger. Rugrats, Teen Titans, Barnyard, Danny Phantom, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Seriously, so much SpongeBob. And they hit the movies too. Cars, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, Wally.
Oh, yeah.
Up. They had Star Wars under their belt. And
Some of
episode
those were pretty
3
good.
was a slapper.
Yeah.
These guys dominated the licensed tie-in games. And eventually, they just stopped. I was looking around.
See, he's a younger guy, so he doesn't remember. See, he's talking about tie-ins to movies. Bro, we used to have tie-ins to Cheetos. You had Chester the Cheetah video game. That's all it was. It was just Cheetos. And then, oh, there's another one. There we go. See, he's talking about PlayStation 2. Remember PlayStation 1? You had Pepsi Man. Straight up, these people would just go and make a game that's basically an advertisement for Pepsi. And that's all it was. Chex Quest? Yes. Burger King? This is a big fucking thing. Chester Cheetah, Too Cool to Fool. I remember seeing this shit at Blockbuster Movies. Blockbuster Video. Yeah, it'd be right there. This was very popular back in the day. Every cereal had a game in it. Yeah, it did.
On the internet trying to figure out why they stopped. You know, where did these go? And everything I found kind of suggested that they didn't stop making them, but they moved over to the more profitable sector of the video game
Gotcha
market.
games?
The mobile games.
Hey, just was wondering, is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke?
So back in the 2000s, they were farming stupid kids by making movie games, and now they're farming stupid kids by making anime gacha games. Hey. It's smart, yeah.
And you know what? They were probably right to do so. Even I ended up spending money in Family Guy: The Quest for Stuff. I wanted to build my Quahog to look cool.
Holy fuck.
There were a lot of these games, and most of them were bad. But
Yes,
for every
they were awful.
100 shitty cookie-cutter games, there was one gem. Odds are, if you had a PS2,
Yeah,
you
hit and
probably
run.
played The Simpsons Hit and
They're
Run,
making a
which,
new one of these.
by all means, should have just been another shitty tie-in in the series
Yeah.
of shitty tie-ins. But this one just so happened to be amazing. It was a GTA clone that was like better than GTA. In fact, it did the multiple characters, the character switching before GTA 5 did it. That
Damn.
means The Simpsons predicted GTA 5. It is time to write another
my
Kotaku
God.
article. Some of my personal favorites were The Matrix Path of Neo. I don't know why I liked this.
I
I've
remember
never
this game. I never played it, but I remember seeing it at stores.
seen The Matrix. I just really was drawn to this game because it made me feel like insane. I don't know how to describe it. I loved the Star Wars Episode 3 tie-in game because it had this cool alternate ending, and I was obsessed with this fight on Mustafar between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and so being able to do that and get a different result just like blew my little mind. And obviously, Spider-Man 2. I think a lot of people forget this was a movie tie-in game.
This was the game, bro. This game had no business being as good as it was. This shit came out. It should have been illegal.
And even this one had great minigames, the most iconic minigame.
And the
where
thing is also, like, and if you go and you look at this gameplay, and like this, let me see if I can just get a better frame. Holy fuck. Yeah, there we go. This really isn't that far off over what we have now. Like, in terms of actual gameplay, you're basically vaulting around a city in the same way that you do now.
It
just
minigame where
looks
you
way
go around
better.
delivering pizzas with that insane music playing. Why couldn't we get that in Insomniac Spider-Man instead of Match the Shapes and Colors? A licensed tie-in game that a lot of people liked was SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, and I know a lot of people like this one because it got a big fat ring. We've established that the game studios are in this for the money,
Yeah.
right? And it's safe to assume that they want the safest bets for their money. The most revenue with the least risk. No brainer. Why don't they just take things people already like and do it again? But
That's
like, make it
exactly what
pretty.
they're doing. You want to know an example of that? There's one right there. You want to see another example of it? Let's go ahead and take a look at another example. Oh. Just do it again. People really like Pokemon. Well, why don't we just go and make another game just like Pokemon? Okay. Sure, but you want to give them guns. Okay, that's fine. That's it. Yeah, it's so easy. I don't know why some of these devs can't figure it out. FIFA Classic, yeah, do it again, but better. Yes.
I think this aversion to risk is absolutely doing damage to the industry, but what do I know? I'm just a guy, and clearly the numbers say otherwise. But I think in all of this, the consumer is not blameless. It is me. I'm the consumer. They're only gonna do something if they know we're gonna buy it, and oh man, am I gonna buy it. I've been loving the remakes lately, I'm not gonna lie. I don't really think we needed 5 iterations of the 2 Last of Us games, but for example, like Resident Evil 4 remake, or the Dead Space remake, or some
The Demon Souls remake was fucking insane. It was so good.
My favorite games in 2023. They may have been remakes, yes, rehashing old ideas, but I felt like in those 2 examples specifically, they expanded the gameplay systems and made changes that honestly justified
Final
remakes.
Fantasy VII.
In Dead Space alone, the zero gravity overhaul was game-changing, as well as a voiced protagonist where there wasn't one before. So they're not just throwing stuff out, you know, they actually do seem to care about some of these games. The Resident Evil 4 remake was a breath of fresh air for me because I got the quality of life from a AAA game, but the goofy, campy fun from a PS2 game. The graphics were stunning and the gameplay was tight and well optimized, and I also got to go up to the shady weapons dealer and buy a rocket launcher to just shoot the final boss with. I just cheesed the entire fight, and the game let me because it was more fun that way. The simplicity.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is another problem that a lot of games have, is that they're too focused around making the game balanced and making everything hard rather than making the game fun to play. And I think really, like, an example of a game that I think that's kind of Helldivers 2. I kind of felt that way about Helldivers 2, but there wasn't anything. So, like, I like being able to play games where it's like, you feel like you're getting away with something, or you're cheating. Like you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing. And that feeling, like I get that in Elden Ring, for example, when I play the shield build and I just block every attack from the last boss and then I kill the last boss in a few tries, right? Haha, like I got you, right? And I know obviously they developed it and they designed it that way, but it feels like that ownership is mine, right? Whenever I figure something out like that. So Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, yeah, exactly. Like in Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, I had like a team that could solo kill the raid boss, right? Lucilius. And I could just go AFK, right? And I just had a macro to where like my character would just keep hitting the same button over and over. And the other 3 people on the team would just do the entire mission for me. So that was super fucking fun. And I think that really a lot of games try to focus on like being challenging and being hard rather than being fun. And I think this is a huge issue.
That I had been missing.
The farm cheese
was
right?
right
Absolutely.
there, and I loved every second of it. To me, this trend of remakes is proof that I'm not alone in missing a time when video games were simple. And it's also proof that nostalgia can and will be weaponized at any moment possible. And
I also think like another good example of a good game recently that's come out, and I actually think that, so this might be a hot take, I think Stellar Blade would have been more well received if it had a male protagonist. I think that all of the noise about Stellar Blade, oh, look at her butt's so big. Like, oh, this isn't realistic. Like, the game itself was insanely fucking good. It had no business being as good as it was, but nobody was talking about that because of all the other noise. Dragon's Dogma 2 was great too. Dragon's Dogma 2 was good, but it could have been a lot better.
Are only good if they are profitable. I am happy that younger generations and just more people in general get to experience these games that I loved as a kid and see why for themselves. And also I'm happy that we get to experience these games in ultra-realistic graphics, 4K huevos shrinking technology, only playable with the Gigafart 8500 graphics card. You may need to upgrade your PC to play this game. I can appreciate good graphics. I mean, I really like when a game looks pretty, but I think this looks better than this, and this looks better than this. Technically,
I think that there's a really big problem that people think that graphical fidelity is artistic quality. Whereas like the art direction and the lighting and the way that things are presented, like the framing of the game, the style, is more important than the fidelity of the game. And I think that the amount of Unreal 5 games that have come out that just look very samey is like the best evidence that I could give you of that being true.
This has higher resolution and better lighting.
It
but
does.
This has a better art direction.
Yeah, it does.
High resolution textures and pretty lighting are always going to be outshined by inspired art direction, creativity, and a focus on atmosphere. This isn't something that...
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like, I think Elden Ring is the best example of this. Elden Ring actually has pretty low graphical fidelity. If you actually look at the models in Elden Ring, they're good, but they're not the same level of quality as a lot of other AAA games. But because the lighting and the way the models are designed is so good, and the way they're presented in the game is so good, it literally doesn't matter. Same as Bloodborne is awful. If you look at Bloodborne, the graphics on that game are terrible, but it doesn't matter because of the way that it's presented.
It's gone from modern gaming. In fact, a lot of recent games have left my jaw on the floor because they're so beautiful. Bloodborne, and
there's also Classic WoW. Think about Classic WoW and how many like really great zones and like frames they have in that game. And it's like the graphics on it are really bad, but it doesn't matter because the style is so good.
Bloodborne, holy shit, Bloodborne. But I think it was more common to focus on art direction back then because they were limited. They couldn't make a realistic looking game. They had to do something unique. Even the games shooting for a realistic approach could not pull off realism. I mean, that is not realism.
That's not like real life, yeah.
It's iconic. A phrase I really like and I've used before in one of these videos is that limitation breeds creativity. Trying to make a game back on the PS2, I imagine was extremely limiting, but it made them so creative, making these incredibly unique looking games. I often find that when creating something and you run into a problem, that solution that you come up with to the problem leads to an infinitely more interesting and unique final product. Like I said, we still get a lot of stunning games coming out lately, but I feel like now with the ability to actually create games that, while not perfectly realistic, look pretty damn real, that becomes the only focus, is making a game that looks realistic, not one...
I think games, like, I like games that have great graphics, but really good graphics will never get me to play a game regularly. Because if it did, New World wouldn't be a dead game. New World had some of the best lighting and the best world design of, like, any MMO. But it still died because there's nothing really to do in the game.
That is creative in its visuals. In a lot of ways, I miss those older games that we used to get, but I'm also glad for all the games that we get now. Like Ghost of Tsushima is one of my favorite games of all time, and Baldur's Gate 3, which I made an entire video on, you should go watch it.
I think really, like, the problem now is that so much of the, like, gaming conversation is dominated by the games that are really bad. Like, for example, people are talking about Suicide Squad all the time, or they're talking about, like, the new Assassin's Creed game, or, like, a few of these other, like, popular to hate games. But the truth is that now we have so many really popular and really good games coming out all the time that, like, people are getting effectively, like, fucking fatigue from it. Like, you're having good games come out constantly. And now it's Concord. Yeah, now Concord is the bad game. Do you think the best-selling online store ruined the game industry? Oh, you're asking me, like, do I think that, like, having a store in a game ruined it? Not really. I mean, I think that... I do think that having a store inside of the game does hurt immersion a lot, but I don't think that's the real reason why it happened. Every streamer that played the graphics exposition Hellblade was like, what the fuck is this bullshit? Yeah, and I mean, like, you're probably going to see that studio have to announce their closing because of that. That's just the way it is.
A phenomenal experience. Compare that to the PS2 Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2, and it's no contest there. The only reason I might want to pick up and play Dark Alliance 2 is because I miss playing it with my dad when I was a kid. I used to live in this big greenhouse right on the corner lot and had a baseball field right across the street. I think the house used to be a church. It was definitely haunted. I was 8 years old when that house caught fire. I remember I was watching SpongeBob and I walked into the kitchen, and I saw these crazy flames up all over the place. Long story short, the house got completely ruined, and my dad got hurt pretty bad. But he recovered fine. They just took some skin from his butt and put it on his hand. I call it his butt hand. This house, though, was mostly ruined, and the property had a separate garage, like a barn kind of thing, and that garage had an attic. Well, my dad decided that we were gonna fix up the house ourselves and live up in that attic. Him and I shared this airbed up there, and right next to it was a projector that I had hooked up my PlayStation 2 and my original Xbox to. During the day, I'd obviously go to school, and then when I got home, I'd help him build however I could. You know, there wasn't much I could do. I was 8, but I remember doing things like helping him put up the ceiling or chip away at the old stone slate in the fireplace. And when we were done for the day, I would go up and play on that PS2 nonstop. Not to get into too much detail, I'm just some guy on the internet. You don't know me. But
yeah, I think everybody has like a story like that. You know, like there's like their version of this.
I was having a hard time. Something about swinging around the city in Spider-Man 2 just made it all melt away. You know? I wasn't Zach with all this stress and all these problems I didn't understand. Zach. I was Spider-Man. I can only imagine how my dad felt at the time. But he always seemed happy when him and I were playing a video game together. He was just watching me play one. But we had a ton of fun, and we would just laugh and hang out together playing Halo 2 on the Xbox, just going through the campaign. And it was in moments like that where it really felt like everything melted.
Bro, like, that's a W, Dad, because, like, if you're playing Halo 2 with your 8-year-old kid and you're doing campaign co-op, remember whenever you'd have your teammate die and then you'd have to restart the match? Bro, his dad didn't mauled out on him, probably dying 50 fucking times in the game. Think about that. That's a W, Dad, yeah. That's crazy.
It didn't feel like we had just lost everything. You know, it felt like we had everything that we could ever need. And it's funny, now sometimes just hearing that PS2 sound, I'm back up in the attic with my dad. Nostalgia is a funny thing that can make you look back fondly on things that might not have been so great.
I haven't thought about this math in
somehow
20 fucking years.
In their own way. And escapism through simple pleasures like video games will always be important. I think we all have that game or just media in general that was able to give us a break from a hard time in our lives and made us hold on to that experience forever. And so now we judge that media by what it did for us rather than what it actually is. I'd love to hear if there was anything like that that stuck with you, you know, either in a comment or...
I have a lot of games like that. I feel like it's extremely common. And like, that's why I think a lot of people play video games is like for escapism and shit like that. It's like, there's probably a lot of games that like you have different memories for like different reasons, etc. And I feel like that's always been like one of the big draws. And I think that also, if you want to enjoy games more, I think that you should really, like, a lot of people go and they overanalyze video games before they play them, and then I think that overanalysis makes them playing the game not feel as good. Because they're, like, constantly thinking about all this stuff that they read about it, and it's like, oh, well, they didn't like this part, etc. Where it's like, if you just play the game, it's like an unironic ignorance is bliss situation where if you're just playing the game for the simple enjoyment of the game, rather than like trying to like think about how good it is or anything like that, just take a step back and try to just enjoy the experience. I think that you will get more out of the game.
Email at this point.
Just play it first. Yeah, exactly.
I'll get back to you, but if you want to, shoot me an email. I might see it. Thank you so much for over 100,000 subscribers. Geek really likes the plaque. So that's good. We sent it off to him. He's the real hero here. 100K is crazy. You know, I started another channel a while ago, and it took me so long. I was trying so hard to get to 100K. And with this one, I wasn't even trying. I just kind of did it. I mean,
this is a really good video.
That shit's cool. This is a cool thing to do. This is my simple pleasure now. So please simply click the card right here and watch another video. This got way too sappy. Click on some other funny shit, please. Okay, goodbye.
I'm gonna be honest. I actually think this guy had like a lot of like really good points in this game, in this video. Like, this is actually a really good video. I think that nostalgia plays a really big part into why people look back on like these games fondly. And I think if people started remaking the movie games and stuff like that, everybody would just call it a soulless cash grab. So it's not like it's like 100%, but I feel like some of the points that he's bringing up are like 100% relevant. Nostalgia is the entire reason. I don't really think that it's the entire reason. I think that a lot of people are fatigued from games that seem like they focus on things that gamers don't care about. And I think that's really where the frustration comes from. It's like you're looking at this game, you're excited for this game, and then it's like, okay, this is pretty much all the same shit that was already there. If it's not, then why do kids go back? If it's not, then why don't kids go back and play these games? Well, because they're products of their time, right? I mean, like, for example, there's a lot of things that you're not going to really go back and do. Like, I bet kids nowadays probably aren't growing up watching Lord of the Rings because they have their own movies now that are part of like their own new culture that they have. And like, that's just what happens, right? It's the same as like Ben-Hur, like, or the Ten Commandments. Like, you know, my parents grew up watching those movies. Now I don't really grow up watching them. It doesn't mean the movies were bad. It just means that like they were a product of a different time. So I don't think that necessarily means it. And I think that like you have other games that are similar to that. Like, as I said, Another Crab's Treasure, stuff like that, that still have the same vibe even now. But yeah, that was a really good movie. I'm actually going to read some of the comments on this. I've never seen this guy's channel before. So yeah, this is really good. Memories are only good if they're profitable. Yeah, true. Putting a PS2 starting screen, beginning of a video, a cheat code. Nostalgia, it's so hard. Yeah, man. Story about you and Dad was really special. Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, everybody's going to have a lot of stories for like kind of like playing video games, like their parents maybe. Like for me, it was with my mom a lot. Like I would play a lot of games with her. And yeah, absolutely. I have so many of those fucking stories, man.